Al, if you could do roll call for us.
Benson.
Here.
Sarda.
Here.
Purdy. Here. Hoffman.
Here.
Minor.
Here.
Mosier.
Here.
Schron.
Here.
Weber.
Here.
Mayor Johnson.
Here.
City Manager Well.
Here.
City Attorney Denharder.
Here. Next, you have before you the minutes of the regular meeting of August 12th, as well as the budget work session of August 6th. What is your pleasure?
Move we approve the minutes.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Is anyone opposed? Next, the city manager's report.
Honorable Mayor, members of the Commission, our mission is to provide exemplary experiences, services, and spaces that create opportunities for everyone to learn, engage, and thrive. I have a few things for you this morning. One, our hyperlinks are not working on the packet, so like the old commercial used to say, you have to let your fingers do the walking. Apologize for that, but you have to do a little bit of more scrolling tonight than normal. So just so everyone's aware of that, might take a few seconds more, Mayor, for the commissioners to get to the specific packet item. We had an exciting couple of weekends in Yankton with some great events and great weather, and we have more excitement coming up. On Friday, as you know, we have the Welcome to Walnut event beginning at 5:30. That will actually kick off with a 4:30 ribbon cutting at Stockwell for those who are interested in attending, and then we'll start our Welcome to Walnut at 5:30. That will go into the evening with food and entertainment and the dedication of our naming rights for our fire feature. And then Saturday and Sunday we have some excitement as well with the air show, and I've asked Commissioner Hoffner to give us a little update since he's been working a little bit on that.
Yes, thank you. We're really excited, and we're coming down to the wire, and of course, as pilots, we look at weather. So thanks to this community and all the people here and the thousands that are watching on Facebook land, I'm sure. But really, we're excited. We have a good group together, and there's been so many partners that helped out, and again, a lot of depending upon weather, and very much thanks for the city. We're going to kick off Walnut 2 with a little bit of flybys, not only advertise, and we're looking at possibility of parachute jumpers in the community and Misty Blue team, and we're really excited about the diverse show. And WNAX helped today with a little couple of promos, and KYNT, and of course the P&D, and we're all the media outlets have been very helpful. This group, the city, would not be done without the city, and we have a great show. It's just really we've been complimented by big names in the industry how diverse of a show and a good show that we put together for what we did. So it's going to be new and unique and bring all kinds of people in town. We're getting a lot of comments, and their tickets are only $10, but if the commission comes, we're going to give you a special $10. So you get a deal. I think you do anyway. So no, really thank you so much for everyone that's participated, and we're looking forward to a great show this weekend. Saturday and Sunday, it's the same show both days, and we have food trucks and all kinds of display and things for kids to do, and World War I reenactments. We have all kinds of smoke and things going on, and it'll be a fun show. Something different and something fun.
It starts at 1 o'clock, is that right?
1 o'clock. Gates open at 10, both Saturday and Sunday. Friday we'll have the practice, and that's why it worked out real well, because we can do the practice at the same time in the Walnut, and then we can just say, hey, can you swing over Walnut and give them a little taste? So that'll work out great to give a little pizzazz over Walnut at the same time we practice. So I don't know if you practice wing walking, but there'll be some upside down wing walkers, and maybe Amy Celebrity can come in and no, they'll tie you on. I think.
I think you only
I
practiced
don't know how to
wing
say
walking
that.
once.
They called and said, hey, do you mind if
No.
we bring a couple more people to wing walk to practice?
That's not in my contract.
No, thanks everyone.
Thank you, Jake. Amy, with Welcome to Walnut, so it starts with the ribbon cutting at 5:30.
The ribbon, yes, the ribbon cutting for Walnut
For Walnut
Street's at
Street.
5:30. The Stockwell ribbon cutting's at 4:30 if anyone's interested. Those of you who are helping with the food, we ask that you meet 5:15, something around that time, so Brittany can kind of coordinate who needs to be where. And I think the police department is grilling the dogs, and so you guys will be serving the food for those who volunteered.
And then we're having a naming rights ceremony recognition for the fire feature at 5:45.
Correct?
and the proclamation at 6 p.m.
Correct.
All
And
right,
then
just so everyone knows.
there'll be an introduction to our entertainment. There'll be a number of things happening along the street that will add interest and variety. There's some, I guess, life-size games, so to speak, people can play, and there'll be some art happening. So just supposed to be a event where people move around and visit and kind of organically are entertained, and not that you sit and watch one thing the entire time.
Amy, for those of us helping, did you want us to wear city shirts? Is that
If you'd like to
preferred?
wear a city shirt, that would be great. It is our first Yankton Bucks home game that night, so Bucks wear would also be appropriate.
I should mention, we've invited a lot of the people that were involved in the planning process to attend, including the SDSU students and their professor. So hopefully some of these individuals who helped us get to where we are today come back and see the vision they had in reality.
We also invited John Baronic and Joe Bartman. I'm not sure if they're attending, but it'd be neat for them to, okay.
I talked to John.
Okay. Well, we'll have to post some pictures and they can enjoy it on Facebook. 21st Street will be open at some point this week, so that is coming down to the final, just the finishing touches. So we're getting a lot of questions on that. So that will be open this week. We do have some work on the railroad crossings. Our street crews need to work a little bit on those. Those are 15th and West City Limits Road. And once those are complete, we're going to start work on 23rd Street. Some of you may have noticed that's kind of has been the bypass to 21st Street intersection, and the 23rd Street intersection is kind of chewed up a little bit, and there's some rough road there. So they will be working on that. We are aware. We didn't want to close off 23rd Street and 21st Street at the same time, so appreciate people's patience on that, but we are aware and we'll get to that as soon as we can. We had our first scoping meeting this morning with FEMA. That's why I look a little dazed and confused. We have a great team from FEMA. I think the folks that are working with the City of Yankton are going to be really good and very helpful. So that was great. It's just a little bit overwhelming right now of all the things we have to do. The next 60 days are really critical for us in terms of putting information together, and they'll be coming down and doing site inspections. We have a lot of reformatting of the same information that we worked really hard on this spring putting together. So we have a deadline approximately of October 23rd, 24th for that 60 days, and then the next really important deadline is December 7th. That's sort of the 6-month deadline. So we'll be having a lot of information coming forward and probably a future work session on some decisions that may need to be made or recommendations on which types of programs to use for what. Fortunately, we have a really good team. Dave and Dwayne have been through FEMA processes before, so that's very helpful. I do want to let everyone know, however, that while we'll keep day-to-day things going and, of course, our obligations, some of the lower priority requests that we get, while we're not going to ignore them, we're going to kind of put them in the parking lot and deal with the main event here for a while, because it's a very high priority and, of course, a lot of potential recouping of costs if we're able to do this right. So we've got a good team, and we're all trying to kind of wade through it together, and I think we'll be in touch. So our next FEMA meeting will be a telephone meeting on Thursday. We'll have weekly meetings with FEMA, either in person or on the phone, and then already after Labor Day we have some site inspections scheduled. So there'll be some days where some staff just won't be available, and we'll just ask everyone's patience as we get through that process. I did send out a request to the commission. We had an inquiry about whether or not the commission wanted to change its ordinance as it pertains to downtown parking permits. Currently, as some of you may remember, we do allow for hotels to have overnight parking per special permit that we administer through our department on a portion of Walnut Street. And there's been a request to expand that to 3rd Street. That would require an ordinance change. I did not hear from anybody, but I wanted to give folks the opportunity if somebody thinks we need to look at that or change that. I'm not hearing anybody, so if you change your mind on that or want to talk further, just let me know. Tomorrow, Mayor Johnson and I will be traveling to Chamberlain to attend the first-class mayor's meeting. I know part of the discussion is going to talk about some bills that are important to the first-class cities that we'll be working on in the legislative year. Following this meeting, that'll be a good time for me to invite Representative Schwach and Hunhoff, as well as Senator Kennedy, to come and visit about some of the things that we want to be looking at as first-class cities. So we'll be driving to Chamberlain and attending that meeting. If you have something that you'd like us to bring up, we certainly will, and we'll report back to you. Also, I wanted to tell the Commission, some of you are involved, but I've been invited, along with a few of you, to attend a meeting with Casey Haberman and the CVB folks regarding their strategic plan. I think this is a really important process. I've already have a couple meetings on my calendar associated with that. If there's something, if you're not directly involved and there's something that you want to bring up or make sure gets touched on, I certainly want to be able to bring that forward to that group. So please let myself, otherwise I saw Commissioner Benson, Mayor Johnson, and Commissioner Schramm's names on one of the email invites, so letting one of them know. I think that's all I have, unless there's questions for me.
Are there any questions? Thank you, City Manager Amy Leon. Next is public appearances. This is a time when members of the audience can address the Commission about items not on our agenda for this evening. If you do have something to address us with, please step to the podium. Seeing no movement in the audience, we'll move on. Tonight, a rarity, there's no consent agenda to approve, nor is there any old business. So we will move on to new business. Number one is an annual event for us here, an old friend, informational presentation and review by Graham Forbes, auditor with Williams & Company, of the 2018 City of Yankton Comprehensive Annual Financial Report. Good evening, Graham.
Good evening. I don't know if this is on or if you can hear me, but maybe we're good. Everybody hear me? Perfect. All right. So yes, thank you. My name is Graham Forbes with Williams Company. So just want to spend a little time to review the audit we conducted of the 12/31/18, so December 31st, 2018 financials. So we're going back in time here a little bit. So pretty much everything that I'm going to reference here would be for the calendar year ended December 31, 2018. So I'll take a quick run through the document. It looks like most of you have in front of you. Take a quick run through, but please feel free to stop me with any questions or Amy, any comments you may have or areas you want to dive deeper into. I'd be happy to do that. But I'll kind of keep it high level, but would be happy to go into any questions you may like. I guess too, I want to thank Ann and Al and Lori and the rest of the finance staff for helping us get through all the audit testing we need to do, as well as assistance putting together this 90-some page document. A lot of information needs put together to make that happen, and we appreciate the help they give us. So thank you to them. The first item, quick, we'll take a look at is on kind of towards the top half of page 2. Kind of aptly named the opinion paragraph there. And that's where we are saying that, in our opinion, in all material respects, that these financial statements are fairly presented. So that's a clean, if you will, or unmodified opinion. That's what we're after there. No adverse or disclaimers of opinions or any other modifications that were necessary there. So right on with what we want there. Starting on page 4 is the management's discussion and analysis section. And that's a lot of good comparative information accompanied with some commentary by city staff on kind of explaining why, if there were some areas that had some change from 2017 to 2018, kind of giving some explanation or some commentary on what caused some of those items to move up or down or what have you. So if you don't want to look through all 90-some pages but want to feel for, how'd the city do this year, where are we at, starting out reading those 9 or 10 pages would be a good piece of information to kind of hit the highlights for the year and how we did. So from there, I think I'll have you skip back to pages 20 and 21. Did you have something, Amy? Or on pages 20 and 21, there we get down to the fund level financial statements, where you'll see 5 different columns there spread throughout the page, and actually showing the results for some of the larger funds of the city, as well as in the other governmental funds column, kind of a subtotal of all these smaller operating funds within the city. So as you see on page 20, the general fund, as you all know, is the major overall operating fund in the city for, your general services, your streets, public safety, parks and rec, and all the administrative and general functions. And kind of, where a lot of your unrestricted dollars are spent, your unrestricted property tax, state aid, different items like that. So you'll see another positive year for the city, an increase of about 1.3 million in fund balance. And one of the comparisons we do for a lot of municipal government is compare the number of days expenditures in unassigned fund balance, and that grew to approximately 200, and I got to scribble down here, 226 days roughly of general fund expenditures in the general fund unassigned fund balance. So definitely a healthy balance there. And as we'll look later, the reasons for that increase, as far as compared to budget, the general fund, was received greater revenue than it was budgeted for, and it was well under budgeted expenditures. So when you get both those items going in the right direction, it turns out to be a pretty positive year. So good news there, and you'll see the Special Capital Improvement Fund, a significant decrease in fund balance for the year, but was exactly as was expected and as was budgeted. That special capital fund, as it collects taxes and other grant and revenues until the time a project comes along, and then you'll see, as we saw this year, a big decrease as dollars are spent on, namely public works type capital projects. So not unexpected or unusual to see a large decrease in fund balance in that type of capital improvement fund as we saw this year. TID number 5, no net change as expected there. The property tax dollars in or transferred out to fund some debt service, and then a pretty stable year in the cumulative effect of the other governmental funds there. So nothing else out of the ordinary, I don't think, to point out there. Then I think we'll flip to 25 and 26, and we'll look at the same type of statements only for the city enterprise funds, or utility funds, if you will. And there you'll see for the water fund towards the bottom of page 25, a pretty significant increase in net position of about $1.98 million. That's a little bit, it's accurate but deceiving a little bit, I think, because what we have going on is, as you are well know, the city at the end of 2018 was still in construction phase of a very, very, very significant water treatment project. And so what's happening is, as those dollars are spent on the project, they're capitalized as a capital asset, and so they're not expense. So even though you spent, I think, about $14 million on that project in 2018, it's not being deducted as an expense. It's sitting in your construction in progress and has not yet been started to depreciate because it's not in service yet. So it's a little bit of a timing phenomenon. So while it was a good solid year, there's a little bit of some kind of, you've had a lot of expenditures that aren't yet depreciating, so a lot of dollars spent that haven't hit your income statement yet, basically, is what I'm trying to explain there. So, but a good year for sure. Wastewater, pretty stable, as well as you see in the non-major enterprise funds, a slight decrease of about $64,000, but, again, for a, $3 to $4 million budget, pretty stable year there as well. So, otherwise, on the financial statement side of things, that's kind of all point out. Starting on page 30 is the notes to the financials. There again, I'm not going to dive into any specific areas, but A lot greater detail contained there on the accounting policies and procedures of the city, and then digs into greater detail on the makeup of outstanding debt the city has, maturity schedules, interest rates, and a lot of other very detailed information on a few other liabilities the city's required to record for some other post-employment benefits, and actually their share of currently the net pension asset for their proportionate share in the South Dakota Public Retirement System. But I think between those two items, there's 6 or 7 pages of a lot of minutia on actuarial assumptions and a lot of other information we're not going to dive into here. But if you are looking to either put yourself to bed at night or find out some more information on some of those areas, a lot of information there for sure. One other item I'll jump quick to, and I mentioned there earlier, starting on page 57 is the budget comparison schedule for the general fund. So what we do there, and it runs for about 2 pages, is we'll take the budgeted amounts, and then which is the original column there, and if there are any corresponding supplemental amendments or changes to that later throughout the year, that would be reflected in that final column, and then compare that to the actual amounts that were achieved during the year in the third column, and see how did we do better or worse than what we actually budgeted. And so you'll see, like I mentioned earlier, on the revenue side, about $1.7 million greater revenue than was actually budgeted. And then the expenditures are broken down by functional area subtotals. And as you see, each functional subtotal was under budget, and overall towards the top of the page 58 there, significantly under budget overall in all areas by about $3.3 million. So some of that's finding ways to save a few dollars, and then there are some of it where it's timing of projects. A project might get budgeted in 2018 or some type of purchase, but because of various reasons may not have gotten accomplished, or will slip into the next fiscal year. But so it's for reasons like that we saw a real positive increase in our general fund balance in 2018. From there's several other schedules, again related to some other post-employment benefits and the city's participation in South Dakota Public Retirement System, again, that I'm not going to spend a lot of time on with you. And then starting on page 68 are the combining schedules for some of those smaller governmental funds I talked about before. So if you want to see, exactly how did the TID number 2 fund do, or the lodging and sales tax fund, you can see all that individual detail in those combining schedules towards the back of the report here if you're wanting to dig down and see how some of those individual revenue streams, what their results were for the year. And so there's combining funds for the non-major governmental funds, the non-major enterprise funds, as well as the internal service funds. So a lot of detail there, as well as some budgetary comparison schedules for all those smaller non-major funds to see how they did as compared to the calendar year budget and the results there, and a lot of comparative type information of that front as well. And then I think the last thing I'll point out is, starting on page 88, is our required reporting for federal expenditures the city spent in 2018. If a government spends over $750,000 of federal funds coming through a combination of any of the federal grant programs, that entity will be required to undergo what is called single audit testing, basically some greater compliance testing on were those federal dollars spent in accordance with the different compliance and requirements that go along with those. And so you'll see in 2018, and very positively, the city spent about $3.8 million in federal funds. And so we was required to do that federal single audit testing, which then there's some reporting starting on pages 90 continuing to 93, giving the results of that testing. And is related to federal dollars, no instance of noncompliance or internal control deficiencies to report as it related to federal awards. So very positive there. The only finding we did have that I will quickly point out, like I do I think every year, is a financial reporting finding And for you that have heard this before, it probably is going to sound very similar, but what that is basically saying that if there's one adjustment that the auditors identify that needs to be made to make the financial statements materially stated, then their control system over financial reporting must not be operating properly, which doesn't leave a lot of room for human error or new auditing standards or anything else. So just like to point that out, that the city, as I point out, does continue to do a great job of being progressive and staying on top of accounting and governmental reporting standards. But it's a pretty high bar is set to try and get to where you have 0 proposed audit adjustments. I think we do a lot of these every year, and if we have one report that goes out each year without that finding, that's a little unusual. So pretty high bar is set there. So I want to point out that, yes, we did have to propose some adjusting journal entries, but, there's been no slip or lack of due diligence by the city in that front, but just, a few areas where we had to make some adjustments to materially state some things. So that's my not so short run through there, but I would be more than happy to answer any questions you might have.
I have a question, Graham. As you've heard earlier, we're about to spend a lot more federal dollars, we hope.
Right.
And I know in this year's budget, we have some already confirmed federal dollars through some other projects that we're working on. So is it a matter of, with your audit process, the more federal dollars we have, the more complicated and maybe more expensive the audit's going to be for us as a city? Or is it, if you spend any federal dollars, you have the testing process you go through?
So, unfortunately, probably yes and yes. Because the way it works is if you go over that $750,000 threshold, you have to have a single audit. And then once you get into that single audit criteria, then there's a bunch of calculations and measurements you have to do to determine if you had proper coverage, which is all very, very objective and very calculatable. But basically, the more dollars that are federal dollars are spent, the more programs you're going to have tested. And so if it was all in one program, for instance, the time complexity wouldn't go up. But when you start to add multiple programs, then you're going to have multiple programs required to be tested potentially, which then unfortunately probably your time and more than likely at that point cost would go up if you have multiple programs that need to be tested. Now, I'm not to the extent it's the cost benefit ratio wouldn't say yes, go after all the grants, because we're not talking that kind of cost for sure, but definitely a little more time. So.
Commissioners, any questions for Graham? If not, I would thank Graham for all the work you and your associates have done, and I always hear good reports from our financial department about the work you do and how easy you are to work with.
Well, thank you.
While you're making sure we're doing everything right. A firm but gentle hand.
We try to have a good working relationship and be a partner, not an advocate. Like I said, at the end of the day, our job is to put our opinion on, are these fairly stated? So I mean, at the end of the day, that's our main objective, but we feel like we can do it in a good working relationship and not make it an adversarial kind of a relationship. So yeah, we enjoy working with the city very much as well. So thank you.
Thank you. So I would ask for a motion to accept the report as presented.
So
I move
moved.
that we accept the report as presented.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any commission discussion? Would anyone in the audience like to address the commission on this item? Roll call.
Moser,
Aye.
Schwan,
Aye.
Weber,
Aye.
Dennison,
Aye.
Sarda,
Aye.
Burdick,
Aye.
Hoffner,
Aye.
Minor,
Aye.
Mayor Johnson.
Aye. Motion passes. Thank you again, Graham.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Number 2 under new business is consideration of memorandum 19-178 regarding our annual supply of bulk de-icing salt. What is your pleasure?
Move the memorandum.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any commission discussion? Would anyone in the audience like to address the commission on this item? Roll call.
Sean,
Aye.
Weber,
Aye.
Benson,
Aye.
Sarda,
Aye.
Burdick.
Aye.
Aye.
Minor,
Aye.
Moser,
Aye.
Mayor Johnson.
Aye. Motion passes. Number 3, under new business, is consideration of memorandum 19-166, recommending approval of the West Side Park Master Plan. Todd, do you want to talk to us a little bit about this before we consider approval?
So it's in your packet. I'm sure Dwayne can put it up also. I don't know what the best way to go about talking through it visually, but anyway, we'll work through it. So again, just so everybody's aware, we started this process back in April with our Park Advisory Board. Let me grab the other two. So we started the process back in April. Again, we knew the museum, the Mead, Yankton Historical Society, and the buildings are going to be gone someday from the park, and that'll free up some green space. We also knew that Mount Marty College was going to be using the track and the football field in the future for different needs that they have. So there's also some insurance things that we've dealt with through the years, and one of them being the bridge leading from the mainland to the island. So there were some things that we knew needed to change in the park. The playground system is the same exact system that was in Riverside Park that we've already replaced. So there were some things coming up where we thought now was the time, again, going back to the comprehensive planning process and how do we get the public involved and see what they think and what the park should look like. So going to the April Park Advisory Board meeting, that night we had a public meeting. We showed some maps and let people draw on maps. We sat down here and talked to the people and asked them questions about what they liked and they didn't like about the park. We did a visual preference survey. We were also able to put that visual preference survey online, and we had 300 and how many ever people take that visual preference survey. Let us, and again, I should mention that Dave Mingo from Community Development was on this in this process. Eric Ambrosian from District 3, we utilized them. So they were at these meetings. We had our own internal meetings. From that input and the visual survey, we were able to form 3 different plans for the park just to give some different ideas to the general public to look at and comprehend and digest and come back with ideas and thoughts. So at the May meeting, we brought out our 3 visuals and kind of showed them an active park, what it would look like and entail. We also showed them what a passive park with more gardens would look like, and then we also kind of did one in the middle that had a little bit of activity but more a gathering theme with shelter houses and those type of activities. So again, went through the process, had a meeting here after our Parks Advisory Board. We were able to take those 3 plans and put them out on the internet for people to take surveys, and we had 250 plus people or so around that number take that survey. Then again, we got together, Dave and Eric and I, and looked at the data and what we had heard all along. We just needed to make sure that we confirmed with each other and what all 3 of us had heard, and then that we really had heard that from the public, and we did. The public likes West Side Park the way it is. They would like a few tweaks to the park, a little better maintenance, upkeep of some things, but they really like West Side Park. So this led us to this final plan, and what we've heard from the start is people like the island. We know we need to replace the bridge. It's seen its better day. Insurance-wise, it doesn't meet some standards, so we'll need to work on that. We showed them different ideas for what the border on the island could look like. Again, we have the landscaping bricks. Again, if you've been by this summer, the water's higher this year, but we've had a lot of people, kids, juveniles, adults. I'm not pointing my finger at anybody, but people like to kick those bricks into the water, lift them up, throw them in. So our retaining wall around that island is not the prettiest, most aesthetic. So we need to do something there. But people like the island. They like the idea of a new bridge. We showed them some different visuals and got some ideas of what we could do there. Shelter house would stay on that south end of the park, but we did hear that people would like 2 restroom complexes, one serving the south end of the park, one serving the north end of the park. We heard about parking. There was discussions about expanding that south parking lot. We leave it alone for now. Someday we could. There is some room there. But just so everybody is aware, and we've added cars in this master plan just to show that you can park on both sides of 5th Street on the south side of the park. Just to the east of that parking lot and a little bit north, the basketball court stays. People would like a little bit better lighting on the court so there can be more nighttime playing. We do have lights on the tennis courts. We do have lights on the skate park. There's minimal lighting for the basketball court right now, so people would like a little bit better lighting. As you go just a little bit east of that parking lot, we do show whether it's an octagon or a paragon or a pentagon or how many ever sides, but there is an open air shelter. We had some visuals in our visual preference, and that was the one that won out. Again, that just, gives people another spot to rest, picnic. If they're in the park, they park there. If people are playing basketball, just to service that area of the park. As you go east, we put in some trails to walk through the park. Again, if you go to a National Parks Conference, read anything out on the internet, the number one amenity people want in green space and in public parks and in public space is walking trails. So it doesn't matter what part of the country you're in. So again, we heard from the public. They like the trees on that end of the park. It's kind of quiet. It's unused. People can go there and relax, and you get away from a little bit of the noise. So we put in some trails to get through the park, but we leave pretty much the east end of the park alone. Again, from just around the nation and then from Mount Marty College students, we heard about hammocks, and can we have hammocks there? Again, people could use the trees that are there if they've got the ropes and attachments to do hammocks already, but we talked about putting in some city-owned hammocks, and we haven't figured out how we want to do that yet, but we show it on here that at some time there could be hammocks in that area of the park. Again, walking trails, benches along the park, pathways, more lighting on those pathways so people feel safe. Tennis courts stay. Again, just to point out, just in case people don't know, there are pickleball lines on those tennis courts. So if people are interested in pickleball, they can go to Westside Park. That stays as is. Skate park stays. Again, there was some discussion about should we move the skate park to Sertoma Park? Should we move the skate park to the South Tennis Courts in Memorial? Because when we have them resurfaced, they don't always last the best. In the end, we've left it here. Not that it couldn't move, but if we were going to move it, the skateboarders like it where it's at, so we would have to contend with that group giving us public comment. If we took away tennis courts in Memorial Park, then we'd be hearing from the tennis group and taking comments from them. If we move it down to Sertoma, then we'll hear from that neighborhood about, well, we're not sure we like a skate park. And again, the skaters, then they're going to the other side of town. And so anyway, so we've left it. We don't think it conflicts with a lot of the things that go on in that park. We think we can make it work, and it has worked. So again, as we're working through the park, the basketball court stays. We talked about taking the playground and moving it closer down to the pond, just because people like the pond and the water, and some people like the ducks and geese. Some people don't like the ducks and geese. But again, through comment, we heard that parents like the playground away from the pond, just in case they've got multiple kids and one goes running and they don't have time to get to that child. The child doesn't end up in the water. The other thing we have going for us is the slope in that park. At one time we talked about a natural amphitheater in that area. Again, with what we have going on down at Riverside and the lawn, we took that back out of the plan. But there is a slope there. Once you're going to do playground on a sloped area, then we'd have landscaping and retaining walls or timbers, and so it makes more sense to keep it up in the flat area. As you head north from the basketball court or along that corridor towards the skate park, it's flat, or more flatter up there anyway, at least. So we leave the playground up there and can enhance that. We'd also looked at doing fitness trails and having multiple stations of fitness equipment, and our survey results just didn't show that was that popular. There was a little bit of interest, but not that popular. What we've talked about is if we do a basic fitness station by the playground equipment, so that way if mom and dad are there with a little bit older kids they don't need to worry about running to the water, they could do a little bit of workout on that. If they're, again, with my children being old enough, I can walk on the trail, and my kids can be playing on the playground. And again, so we looked at doing just a little bit of a fitness station there if that's where we want to go in the future. We do have a private donor in the community that is going to give us some money to put in bocce ball courts. Bocce ball, if you're not familiar with it, is croquet, lawn bowling, but fairly simple. You just roll some balls. People do it in grass, turf areas, but this would actually have artificial turf. We thought about this being the initial location. We've switched our minds a little bit. The money that we're going to get, we're going to try to put in 2 bocce ball courts in Memorial Park, north of the sand horseshoe pits. And the reason we chose there is one, we can get 2 courts in easily, parking, access. We actually have a built-in user group. If you weren't aware, Special Olympics has bocce ball in their summer programming and their big tournament that they have in the summer. And they've actually in the past requested 5 or 6 courts. So starting with 2 will work for us over in Memorial, but we have some dead, unused space. It's nice flat space. It has grass. It has some shade between the skate park and the tennis courts, but we do not have, you're really limited with that long, narrow spot. So bocce fits in there. So again, if we have popularity, the courts are popular in Memorial Park, again, that could be a space that's utilized in the future. As you're moving west past the skateboard park, the parking lot stays, but we then started to hear, don't move the museum building, let's reuse that and make it a shelter that people can use year-round, and please have a kitchenette in it. So we have a stove and a refrigerator and sinks and multiple plug-ins. Again, saving that building from what we heard from Crystal and the museum, not in very good shape. It doesn't make sense to stay that building, but we've programmed for a new 4-season shelter just off the skateboard park and off that parking lot. And if you go to this visual, it would have windows. It would be angled, so the windows look out over the gazebo, over the pond, over the fountain. You also have a visual of the Mount Marty Chapel and the steeple up above the hospital. So it'd be a great visual close to the parking lot. The old restroom building, we've had comments in the past, it doesn't really meet ADA standards. It's up on a cement platform, and there's railings so kids don't fall off into the parking lot. It's just not in good shape. So in the future master plan, the restrooms would get moved in and incorporated into the 4-season shelter. They would be on one end, could serve the park on the north end, but then we'd also have that 4-season shelter with a kitchenette. More parking. We've heard about that people want more parking on the west end of the park, so we use the parking lots that is there and just expand it a little bit width-wise to get some more parking. The area where the buildings get moved out of the museum is flat space. We could do a little bit with some berms and create a little visual barrier between the road and that area. Could do flower. Again, we talked a lot about formal flower gardens, healing gardens, what you can see from the hospital. And so we do have, a future plan. Again, it takes time, money, staffing to maintain a formal flower garden if you're not going with perennials. So we do show a flower garden there. That is flat space up in that area. So if teams want to practice soccer, flag football, again, there's no infield, but baseball, softball, they could do that. Getting some trees planted along the roadway. The shading on this shows just a little bit of, again, if you wanted to do some berms to create a barrier so people just aren't flowing out into the street, into the traffic. As you move down, we do have an ADA fishing dock. We heard about people love that in the past the pond has been stocked. Game Fish and Parks, South Dakota Game Fish and Parks does stock the pond. So we've added an ADA dock on the north end. We've added some pond wildlife habitat. Again, it's a debate on whether you keep the ducks and the geese or not. Again, people have asked about fences and how do you keep the ducks off of Summit Street, and we've gone round and round, and we don't have an answer for that because, again, at some point fences end and they can go over or around, so we just haven't figured out a good way. But we talked about doing a little bit more of a habitat area. We do know the geese and the ducks do have some nests in that area, and lay some eggs and do some different things like that. We, the city of Yankton, do not kill duck or smash duck eggs. Again, that's been a rumor out in the world. We don't spend our time over there smashing duck and geese eggs, so that's not us. If it's happening, it's not us, Parks Department. But anyway, The new pond wildlife habit, we do get the path going around the pond, so that would mean we get some path cement trail on the west side of the pond, so now that would be a loop. The nice thing about the trails in that park is there is elevation going from the west to the east. You go up a hill, so if you were walking those trails, again, you could elevate your heart rate fairly easily just by walking because you're going up and down in elevation. So bike racks, trash cans, recycling cans, more drinking fountains, and again, as I referenced earlier, seating and lighting along the trail. But Dave, did I hit everything? Again, visuals over here. We do have the Four Seasons shelter. The one up in the corner shows the new bridge leading to the island. And the reality is we probably would look at doing a prefabbed bridge, not built, but one that's you can just bring in with a crane, set down. It's been made somewhere else and plop in there. Does, if you look through it, shows the fountain and the ADA dock in the background. That's the octagonal shelter over by the basketball court. We do have the bocce ball courts and a visual down there for that. So again, we went through the process, presented this on August 5th. I do believe was the Monday night where we presented this to the Park Advisory Board and the public, had a few people make comments. One thing to note that's probably important is Summit Street is a South Dakota state highway. And Dave, in discussions, probably in the future, there's only going to be one crosswalk in this stretch. And so we've had some discussions with Avera Sacred Heart Hospital and have had them start to talk with Mount Marty College on what's the plan if people are going to transition from the campus across to the park, what's the best way for that to happen. So they're having some communications to get back to us about. But there is parking, if you look on the east side, Spruce Street, not on the park side, but on the east side of Spruce Street there is parking along the Mount Marty College field training area. We do have it signed no parking along the skateboard park and the tennis courts, but along the fence area on the north side, there currently is not signage. It's not a very wide road, so that might be something we want to look at in the future of, are we going to allow parking along that stretch, or again, we show cars there because there is parking allowed there now. But anyway, that kind of sums it up in a nutshell. Like I said, the biggest debate would be on whether we keep the ducks and the geese or we get rid of the ducks and the geese. There's people for them and there's people against them. So as of right now, we have no plans to get rid of them. We know kids and families like them. Other thing we've talked about is adding feeding stations where you can put the coins in and get the proper food to feed the ducks and the geese, and then also putting up signage that says, please don't feed ducks and geese bread, it's bad for them. Doing a little bit of education that way. But somebody threw out a zoo idea, and should we fence the ducks and geese and run some type of zoo, and we are not for that idea at this time. So it's not in the plan. Timing, funding, reality is this is going to be probably a 5 to 20 year vision. To do a shelter like that's going to be quite a bit of money. But that'll be a part of the budget process. It'll be a part of the comprehensive plan process, and again, priorities of the commission. Some of the smaller type of stuff we'll try to start to budget for and knock off. One of the first things would be obviously the bridge because of some of the insurance things, and then also the playground. And we'll look to Land Water Conservation Fund to try to help us with some grant money for the playground like we have in other parks. But Dave, comments?
I would just say real quickly, and I told the park board this also, this is a perfect example of a process that I'm really confident worked, because if you would have asked me when we were halfway through this process what the end result would have been, I was almost 50% wrong. So even with my history in the community, getting the public comment and developing the plan in increments over time yielded, what they wanted, and that's how the planning process is supposed to work. So I was really happy with how the process went, even though I would have been wrong. And I thought a more passive idea was going to be the more popular, but they wanted to keep it active too. So good job.
And again, we won't please everybody with this plan. There may be ideas that people threw at us, and again, between visual surveys and sitting here and having public comment, things dropped out just because they didn't gain traction. So we're happy with where the process ended up.
Any commission discussion?
Not so much a discussion, but a thank you to Dave, Todd, and Eric for the time they put into this. I think I attended all of the conceptual meetings, obviously the liaison to the Parks Advisory Board, and they did a wonderful job presenting this to the community, listening, taking input, and putting together a plan like this. So I do want to thank them for all the time that they put into that. I thought they did a wonderful job really pulling together a lot of varied ideas from the community to come up with a concept that I think was very well received, not only by the Parks Advisory Board, but by the community members that were in attendance that night. So thank you for your work on that.
Any more discussion? Do we have a motion?
Move to approve the memorandum, master plan.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Once again, any more commission discussion?
Again, sometimes it's thrown out that, oh, we have these plans and they should sit on a shelf and we don't ever use them, but that's not the case. Again, as Dave would say with the comp plan, things will get done, and in 20 years when we look back, we'll see that. But it won't be a fast process, but it won't just sit there. We will use it. It'll help us guide and make decisions. So thank you.
And thank you. Would anyone in the audience like to address the commission on this item? Ed, please step to the podium.
My name is Edward Gleich, and the deal about wild animals in your park, we're going to stop 24 Canadian geese southbound from landing in a park and using the facility, or 24 Canadian geese northbound landing in our facility. I mean, it's a pond, the wild animals see it at night, put the land, shower, and some kids give them free food, so it's a win-win situation for everybody. So, I mean, how can you stop the animal from landing?
Right. There are some cities in the country that have harvested their geese for use at local food banks, but we're not suggesting that at this time either. We think we work with the current partners that we have.
Would anyone else in the audience like to address the commission on this item? Roll call.
Aye.
Benson.
Aye.
Sarda.
Aye.
Burdick.
Aye.
Hoffman.
Aye.
Minor.
Aye.
Moser.
Aye.
Schron.
Aye.
Johnson.
Aye. Motion passes. Number 4 under new business is consideration of memorandum 19-179 regarding commission travel opportunities.
Honorable Mayor, members of the commission, wanted to have you all look at your calendars and let us know if you have interest in attending either the South Dakota Municipal League in the beautiful city of Aberdeen, South Dakota. That's going to take place October 8th through 11th. We have a number of staff people attending. We will not be able to get you into the host conference hotel, I don't believe. I think that is full, but we could get you a room elsewhere in Aberdeen if the commission has interest in attending that. Also, National League of Cities this year is in San Antonio, Texas. That's taking place just before Thanksgiving, the week just before Thanksgiving. Mayor Johnson has expressed interest in attending and just looking for direction on who wants to attend. A couple of considerations. League of Cities is, of course, a little more expensive, involves some airfare, hotel, and registration fee. Probably about $3,000-ish an attendee when you add flight, hotel room in a major city, food, etc. And the registration is a couple $100. League of Cities for South Dakota is South Dakota League of Cities is fairly inexpensive, probably $100 a night for a hotel room, and then travel, and we could send you up. I'm on the board, so I need to be there a little bit longer, but we could send you up with a staff person. So just looking for direction in your decision as to who wants to go. In the past, we've limited the national conferences to 3 commissioners, but that's entirely up to you all and what you see best fit.
Is there any discussion?
I think the National League of Cities, there's been a pretty good showing from Yankton, I think, that goes to that, and I think there's been benefit for commissioners to go. So I'm not going to go, but if someone, I think it is a good opportunity, and I think some good stuff has come back from it. So I would encourage someone to go.
That's my opinion. National League of Cities, I think, gives great value to the city of Yankton in ideas and networking. And when you go to that conference, time and again you hear from the participants, one of the best things about being involved in city government is going to the National League of Cities conference and learning. And I've been involved with the Small Cities Council for the National League of Cities, which is communities with 50,000 people or less, and went to South Carolina in July to participate in their annual meeting. And so there we learned a lot of things about opportunity zones, about the possibilities there that were completely new to me, and ADA accessible websites, which surprised a lot of us, the extent of effort you have to go to comply with rules that are not new, but people just haven't thought a lot about. So yeah, for me, I've definitely found value in it, and I would like to go. I would love for others of you to join me as well.
Yeah, I'd like to echo those comments. I attended twice and got a wealth of information. And I think I see a lot of commissioners that haven't been to one of them yet, so I think there might be some opportunity here.
So I guess people can check their calendars. You don't have to decide today, but as long as everyone's on board with some of us attending.
If possible, Mayor, we would like to decide as soon as possible. We've missed the early registration deadline, and so as time goes on, the registration gets more expensive. So
So let Amy know by Friday.
yeah, if you could let me know by, or maybe by, you know, when we're coming back to work, Tuesday after Labor Day, that'd be beneficial as well. So we'll just maybe take do you want to take as many people as want to go, or 3, or? I think 3 is a good number. Okay. So we will have the first 3 who say they would like to go and are available. Typically we go the night before, since it's kind of a day of travel. And depending upon what's happening, depending upon how long we stay, et cetera, but typically we would go the night before. So take a look. And then if anybody does want to go to Municipal League, I feel like, Chris, you went once to the South Dakota Municipal League. I think Aberdeen is as exciting as San Antonio, and there is a lot to learn there as well. And there's something to be said to be able to know your folks that have positions similar to you throughout the state, and to really collaborate within the state to change things on a statewide basis. So it is, even if you don't go for 3 days, if you go up for, they have one day that's kind of more focused on elected officials. If somebody's interested in that, we can arrange that as well.
All right, any more discussion? Does anyone feel we need to make a motion on that, or are we okay?
I have the direction I need.
Okay. Moving on then to number 5, under new business, is consideration of memorandum 19-180 regarding resolution 19-38, a conditional use permit for a self-storage facility on the, so the address would be 2916 Piper Street. OK Properties is the owner, and Aaron Hansen is the applicant. What is your pleasure?
Move the memorandum.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any commission discussion on this item? Dave, is there anything special about this that we should know?
Conditional use permits in general are those things that we should approve as long as they meet the pre-listed conditions associated with those types of uses. The plan as submitted meets all of those conditions, and as staff and administrators, we would follow through with making sure that they were all met during construction. Staff and the Planning Commission recommended approval.
Any further discussion amongst the commissioners? Would anyone in the audience like to address the commission on this item? Roll call.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes. Thank you for joining us, Aaron. Number 6, under new business, consideration of memorandum 19-181 regarding resolution 19-39, a replat of 901 East 7th Street, and the city of Yankton is the owner. Dave, maybe you should explain what's going on here.
So we have a couple of things going on here. Primarily, we are replatting a piece of property where Yankton Transit sits because they have an opportunity with some federal grant funding to add on to their facility. They are short of space, and it sounds like they've got a high percentage of grant funds available to add on. One of the things they can count as match for their project is property that's utilized for their project, and even though the city of Yankton owns all of this property, including the property that's under their current facility, they can count it as match towards their application for their building. So we prepared with a surveyor the plat that's in your packet, and that survey would provide for this addition and also actually create a lot for the potential for one more future expansion for them at the site. And it would also create that south tract of property that the commission can decide at some point in the future to make available for development or to hear development proposals on. So kind of killed 3 birds with 1 stone here, and getting ready for the transit project and also preparing the rest of our property in that neighborhood for some yet to be announced project.
Is the expectation that they would expand to the east then?
Correct.
Okay.
Yep. That's the only direction it really works without getting too close to the floodway.
Is there any commission discussion? And is there a motion?
So moved. Approval.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. If there's no further commission discussion, I will ask the audience if there's anyone who would like to address the commission on this item. Roll call.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye. Motion passes. Number 7 under new business is consideration of memorandum 19-182 regarding resolution 19-40, a plat of the approximate address of 3547 U.S. Highway 81. Jason Harmlick is the owner. What is your pleasure?
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Dave, is there anything you want to add to this?
It's
Discussion.
at the furthest extent of our 3-mile platting jurisdiction. Our reason for reviewing this is for potential extension of the future street grid. It meets those requirements. Recommend approval.
Commissioners, any further discussion? Would anyone in the audience like to address the commission on this item? Roll call.
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Abstain.
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes. Number 8 under new business is consideration of memorandum 19-183 regarding resolution 19-41, a replat of 1804 along Highway 50. Michael Elliott is the member of TME LLC?
Acronym
No?
TEME.
TEME LLC, which is the owner. What is your pleasure?
I'll move the memorandum.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any commission discussion? Would anyone in the audience like to address the commission on this item? Roll call.
Aye.
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 Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes. Number 9 under new business is consideration of memorandum 19-184, a bid award for the apron expansion project at the Chan Gurney Municipal Airport. The low bid is $1,304,458 from T&R Contracting, and this would be contingent upon Federal Aviation Administration approval as well. What is your pleasure?
Move the memorandum.
Second?
We have a motion and a second. Is there any commission discussion? It's been a long road to get here, Dave, so we appreciate all your efforts. Would anyone in the audience like to address the commission? Roll call.
Aye.
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 Aye. Aye. Aye.
Aye. Motion passes. Number 10 under new business is consideration of memorandum 19-185, a business improvement district number 1 board of directors expenditure recommendation for the Convention and Visitors Bureau. The board is recommending a $10,000 one-time allocation to the Convention and Visitors Bureau. This will be used for their strategic planning process. What is your pleasure?
Move the memorandum.
Second?
We have a motion and a second. Is there any commission discussion? We talked about this a little bit earlier this evening. Would anyone in the audience like to address the commission? Roll call.
Aye.
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 Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes. Number 11 under new business is introduction, first reading, and establishing September 9th as the second reading of the 2020 proposed budget ordinance, which is an ordinance to appropriate monies for defraying the necessary expenses and liabilities of the City of Yankton for the fiscal year beginning January 1st, 2020, and ending December 31st, 2020, and providing for the levy of annual taxes for all funds created by ordinance within said city. What is your pleasure?
Introduced.
It is introduced. Amy, the only real change from last time is the increase from 20 to 30,000 for the facade program downtown. Is there anything else that we should be aware of?
Other than, fixing some small errors and things that we found as we went through the document, nothing that changes anything substantially. But yes, other than that, the biggest change would be, since you saw the budget recommendation, would be going back to the $30,000 allocation and not stepping back on that facade program to continue to build as much momentum as we can in the downtown and hopefully keep those things happening that we like to see.
All right, so it's introduced. Number 12 under new business is consideration of memorandum 19-174 regarding change order number 1, final project acceptance and final payment for the Walnut Street. It's not Wall Street yet, but we're working towards it. Walnut Street project. The final cost of that was $6,910.25. And it's kind of appropriate that we're considering this tonight since we're having a big party there on Friday. So what is your pleasure?
Move the memorandum.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any further commission discussion? Would anyone in the audience like to address the commission on this item? Roll call.
Aye.
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 Aye. Motion passes. With that, we have no further business on tonight's agenda, so can I get a motion to adjourn?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Is anyone opposed? This meeting is adjourned. Thank you, everyone.